A nearly 3 decades old mystery solved. Ice Age animals with fur and organs intact, and frozen graveyards of ancient whales and warplanes. These are incredible discoveries found frozen in ice. In the summer of 2025, a melting glacier in northern Pakistan finally put an end to a nearly 3-decade-long missing persons case. The local shepherd noticed clothing sticking out of the ice. When he got closer, it turned out to be a human body. It had been frozen in place for decades. The man had been missing since 1997. He was later identified as a man who disappeared at 31 years old while traveling through the mountains with his brother. During bad weather, he reportedly fell into a glacier and was never seen again. For all these years, his family had no answers. Thanks to the cold, dry environment inside the ice, his remains were remarkably well preserved. His clothes weren't even torn, and his identity card was still in his pocket. Even after 28 years, relatives still recognized him. One family member told reporters, "Finally, we've got some relief after the recovery of his dead body." Back in 2010, hunters in search of ivory tusks up in northern Russia came across one of the best preserved mammoth remains in history. Instead of just finding old bones, they found an almost complete woolly mammoth frozen in the ground. Her trunk, chunks of her skeleton, soft tissue, hair, pretty much the whole thing. Scientists named her Yuka, and after examining the remains, discovered she died around 39,000 years ago. Museums around the world put her on display so people could see what an actual Ice Age giant looked like up close. In the last few years, scientists have been pulling out traces of ancient RNA from the remains of ancient animals like Yuka. RNA is the material cells use to actually carry out instructions from DNA, meaning researchers could see what these animals were actively doing near the end of their life. Yuka's was the oldest RNA anyone had ever sequenced, and it told them things about muscle stress and how her metabolism worked, stuff you just can't figure out from DNA alone. Back in 1993, an archaeologist named Dalia was out digging with her team in the Yukok Plateau in southwestern Siberia. Found something amazing. Under a pile of rocks, there was a wooden coffin with a young woman inside. She's now known as the Pazyryk Ice Maiden. She was mostly a skeleton, but still had some of her skin thanks to the permafrost, which kept her body and everything buried with her in pretty good condition, considering it had all been sitting there for over 2,400 years. Along with her body were horses that had been sacrificed. All of them had fancy harnesses on. The way the burial mound was built, everything inside the coffin froze pretty soon after they buried her. That freezing kept the fabrics, decorations, and her actual body intact until the archaeologists found her. Based on how elaborate her burial was, it's clear this woman was very important. Her clothes included a silk shirt and colorful fabrics, and she had detailed tattoos. Back in 2015, way up north in Siberia near a place called Tumat, researchers found 2 Ice Age canine cubs frozen in permafrost. They died roughly 14,000 years ago. First, people called them the Tumat puppies. They were found in frozen soil right next to woolly mammoth bones and other Ice Age animal remains that had been butchered by early humans. Because they'd been found close to what was believed to be an ancient human settlement of some kind, people thought these cubs might be early domestic dogs. But when scientists ran tests, they found out these were actually wolves. The cubs probably died together when their underground den caved in, trapping them and freezing them before they could decompose. Researchers even found remains of their last meals inside their digestive systems. They'd picked at woolly rhinoceros, and there were also feathers from some small bird. It's pretty incredible that their soft tissues, fur, and stomach contents all survived. I mean, that lets scientists piece together so much more than they'd be able to if they only had a pile of bones. In July 1942, during World War II, a bunch of US military planes were flying from the United States to Britain. There were 6 fighters and 2 B-17 bombers in the group. They hit a nasty storm over Greenland, and with nowhere safe to land, pilots had to make emergency landings right on the ice. The crews made it out alive, but they had to leave the planes behind. Snow and ice buried them after that. Years went by, and the whole thing became a kind of legend. The planes would never be seen again. But in 1992, some explorers found one of those fighters buried under more than 260 feet of ice. They dug it up piece by piece, fixed it up, and gave it a new name, Glacier Girl, World War II plane that they actually got flying again after being trapped in ice all those decades. You'd never get me on that flight, but it does make you wonder what else might be buried deep under Greenland's ice. Scientists and explorers still use ground-penetrating radar and special thermal equipment to look for more aircraft down there, and obviously there's more fighter planes, one in particular called Echo, buried somewhere that they might be able to dig out someday. In fall 2024, a guy named Helge Tidland was hiking around a melting patch of ice on a mountain plateau in western Norway, and he noticed a bunch of wooden logs sticking out of the ice. It looked like, random sticks and stuff, but it actually turned out to be a 1,500-year-old reindeer trap from the early Iron Age. Archaeologists started excavating in 2025, and what they found was a mass capture system made from hundreds of cut wooden posts and logs. These formed 2 long fences that would funnel animals into a kill pen. Nearby, they found reindeer antlers with cut marks on them, iron spearheads, wooden arrows, and pieces of bows. Obviously, hunters had used this spot to hunt and butcher entire herds. One of the weirdest things they found was this really nice carved wooden paddle made from pine and a tiny pin made from antler that looked like a miniature axe. Pretty nifty. Some archaeologists were calling this one of the most spectacular ice discoveries in Norway. On Vilcek Island, way up in the Russian Arctic, scientists from the Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute made a discovery. A glacier on the island had been retreating for less than 20 years, and satellite images plus fieldwork showed this whole stretch of land that used to be hidden under ice and permafrost. And this newly exposed land was covered in ancient whale bones. And some were still mostly intact, especially the ones closest to the ice. The ones further from the glacier weren't in as good shape. They'd been exposed longer after the ice melted. Researchers think that at some point sea levels rose fast enough that a large number of whales ended up stranded on what's now a flat raised beach sitting on dry land. Because ice moved in and locked everything in place, the bones stayed right where they fell. What's left isn't just a pile of old skeletons, it's a frozen graveyard, showing what Arctic marine life looked like thousands of years ago, only now being exposed as the glacier continues to melt. Under Antarctica's massive ice sheet, there are hundreds of lakes that have been sealed off from the surface for thousands of years. These are called subglacial lakes, and they're some of the most extreme places on Earth. The most famous ones include Lake Vostok, which sits under roughly 2.5 miles of ice in the East Antarctic ice sheet. Scientists have mapped these lakes using radar and satellites because you obviously can't see them from above. Even though these lakes are in total darkness and buried under miles of ice, at least some of them have tiny living things that have adapted to the extreme cold, high pressure, and zero sunlight. In 2013, researchers drilled into another subglacial lake in Antarctica called Lake Willans and found proof of life down there, proof that organisms can survive, maybe even thrive, in places people thought nothing could ever live. Lake Vostok is the biggest one we know about, and it's been cut off from the atmosphere for thousands of years. The water stays liquid under all that ice because the intense pressure lowers the freezing point, and heat rising from deep in the earth keeps it from freezing solid. These lakes change how scientists think about what makes a place habitable, though. Instead of needing sunlight and warmth, some life forms down there just run on chemical energy and have extremely slow metabolisms. Up in the Princess Margaret Mountains high above the Arctic Circle in northern Canada, scientists found fossils of walnut trees and other plants. Now, that sounds pretty boring, but these fossils date back to around 45 million years. They came from what used to be a thick rainforest along the Arctic Ocean's shores. Researchers have dug up thousands of plant fossils, including walnuts, tree stumps, roots, wood, leaves, cones, and seeds that still look like what they originally were, even though they've been buried under layers of dirt and mud and later ice for tens of millions of years. They found 3 previously unknown species of extinct walnut trees too. These walnut fossils were found about 3,000 kilometers further north than where walnut trees grow today, which already tells you how different the Arctic used to be. Instead of ice and bare rock, this place was once covered in thick forests with huge trees and plant life. Basically, the complete opposite of the frozen wasteland that you see there now. What makes the discovery even crazier is how well everything survived. The plants didn't slowly rot away, they got buried fast in muddy swamps and shallow lakes and then sealed off when ice moved in. On September 19, 1991, 2 German hikers named Helmut and Erika Simon were walking above 10,000 feet in the Ötzi Alps along the Austria-Italy border. They spotted something weird sticking out of the ice. First, they thought it might be someone who died climbing recently, but turned out to be a man who'd been dead for around 5,300 years. This was a naturally mummified human body that had been frozen in ice since around 3300 BCE. He was nicknamed Ötzi the Iceman. Once researchers figured out how old he was, they started a full excavation. Ötzi was found with a complete set of gear: a wood bow, a quiver with arrows, a flint dagger, containers made from birch bark, and clothing from animal hides. Scientists later found his shoes, which were stuffed with grass for insulation, and he had a copper-bladed axe, which was one of the earliest metal tools in Europe at the time. Radiocarbon dating put his life in the Copper Age, a time when humans were switching from stone tools to metal ones. Ötzi's remains weren't in a tomb or anything. He just died and got buried by snow and ice, which preserved him and all his gear almost perfectly for thousands of years. And that has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.